Well, welcome to Enthinkment Circle. Each week we tackle the hard questions. We go into the definitions of terms from Sanskrit and German and French and Latin. We take on all languages, Russian. I don't want to leave them out. So today we're going to look at some Sanskrit terms. Sabine might pop in with some German terms. We'll see. We're going to deal with the last element in our series, number 7, the crown seed. What are you wishing for? Practice, publicize to build support for new stories and reflect on transcendental values. So, what does all that mean? It means we're going to talk about spirit, we're going to talk about the soul and the true self. We're going to go beyond the normal approach. But it turns out it is normal. We found out, and Grace Ann's going to tell you the story. We were in a room and we were shocked to see some of the major CEOs of the United States of America there with Wayne Alderson and his daughter and doing something called Value of the Person. And the Wayne Alderson story, we'll let Grace Ann tell part of it. I'll tell part of it. She'll tell the better part of it, and we'll get into some of the Jane terms for this crown seed, some of the mantras, some of the special terms that we use. So we're talking about an energy center called the crown. You probably know it in your chakras if you've done any chakra work. Everybody here has done chakra work, so I know that you're all into it. But Gurudev takes it to a whole other level, trust me. When I met Grace Ann, first thing we had to do after I got approved by the horse was go get approved by Gurudev Shichabanu. And one of the things Grace Ann and I did together was go to see Uncle Nunzio and go to Value of the Person. And Grace Ann, will let you take it from here and tell the story. Go ahead. No ventriloquism. We need you to actually open your mic.
My uncle Nunzio Galetta had an engineering firm in Pittsburgh, a small firm, and they ended up doing some work for the Heinz Company. Heinz 57 Varieties, one of the biggest companies in Pittsburgh. And they were a small engineering firm, and they beat out a lot of other companies getting these contracts. And my uncle became good friends with some of the high level management there. And I'm not sure how, whether it was through my uncle or through the Heinz people, that my uncle met Wayne Alderson. And so Wayne had been a World War II veteran who was shot in the forehead. And he had a very noticeable dent right about in the position of the third eye. And and he tells the story of no one expected him to survive, but he did. And kind of like Tom, he said to himself, well, what am I here for? And as a result of that experience, he developed this love, dignity, and respect in the workplace, those three elements. And so my uncle had been through there. So, David, do you want me to give the background of how he came to that? He had been
Absolutely. Go for it.
a successful manager in a steel mill in Pittsburgh. So back in those days, there were some very strong unions, and the unions at the steel mill were Teamsters, probably the strongest union out there. And the steel mills were Pittsburgh, but they were starting to fade and lose out to international trade. And so they were having problems in the steel mills, not only with the unions, but internationally with the whole business of steel making. So Wayne was a manager of a major steel mill in Pittsburgh, and he was applying these ideas of love, dignity, and respect to the point that they had a room that they used as a chapel, and they had Bible sessions there, but it wasn't limited to the Bible, and people of all faiths were there. And so Wayne became very successful. And I'll tell you how he implemented love, dignity, and respect in the workplace. One of the things he did was when they had meetings for all the employees, they invited all the family members too, because he said it affects the whole family. So wives and kids would come too, and they would all discuss these things. And there's a interesting little story that was told, I heard, that one of the workers was coming back from a lunch break, but he was late. And he had his wife drive him to the back door of the factory, hoping to sneak in. And who's at the back door but Wayne himself, standing out on the stoop of the back door of the factory. So the guy gets out thinking he's going to really be in trouble. And sure enough, Wayne calls him over as he gets out of the car and heads to the factory. And Wayne calls him over and says, "Looks like you forgot to kiss your wife goodbye." So he had the guy go kiss his wife goodbye before he came to work. That's all he said to him. And that says it all. How he applied his values. So he became so successful that their steel mill made more money than any of the competitors. By about, what was it, David, about 25%? Was that the statistic you found?
Yeah, the profits were up 25% or 20%, and the sales were up, I think, 100%, something like that.
Anyway, incredible success. And he had, in doing that, he had partnered with the head of the Teamsters. Because he said, we're both after the same goals. And so they became partners. I just talked to my uncle who was good friends with him, and he said this head of the Teamsters was an Italian guy, and he said he became like a brother to Wayne. They worked together. And what happened was David thinks that the steel mill was bought out by somebody else, but whoever had it at that time was not happy with a close relationship with the union. They felt, and I remember those days when management thought union was the enemy. And so they got rid of him because of his close ties to the union. So he decided he would take this approach to management, which was proven successful. And he partnered with the union head, and they went together and approached companies and sold their package, which was a, really unusual partnership that no one expected. And so they were very successful in demonstrating how they could all work together, union and management, and neither take advantage of the other, but all win. And he did that for many years, and we went to one of their seminars. When I was at the seminar, John Turian was the Heinz executive who was speaking, that they too were getting some award or something. And I was sitting with some of the Heinz employees who worked for John Turian. And I said, "So what makes him such a good boss?" And they said, "Oh, he talks to us." Which I realized it wasn't what he was saying to them. It was the fact that by saying he talks to us, what they meant was they had conversations and he listened to what they said. It wasn't just talking. So, anyway, That's the story.
Well,
Betty, did you have a question?
And I was going to forget to mute as well. I love that story. I kept thinking there's something here that I'm not clear. So the ugly question I want to ask is, were these the days before shareholders or during shareholders? Did he have to answer to the shareholders?
Um, that wasn't an element that they talked about.
Okay.
So I wouldn't know for sure, but it was not mentioned. It was
Okay.
just the corporate bosses that they talked about.
Okay. Well, what I'm getting from that then is he was doing successfully enough that if he did have shareholders, they were not pushing him to go against good principles of being a human. And I love the word dignity added to love and respect because that's probably the part we neglect in
Huh.
our own dealings.
Well, the Academy has picked up on that. Our student, Mabel Sanchez, focused on dignity in the workplace, and it's
Mm.
become a big area now. The
Okay.
humanistic management people have picked up on it too, the term dignity,
Mm-hmm.
and they had it before anybody that I've seen.
Okay. Yep.
But yeah, and there was another example, and I can't. I'll come back to me in a minute.
Mm.
How he demonstrated that.
You're muted, David.
I was going to ask Olivia. She's got her hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Well, so this is just really delicious for me to hear. I love this stuff. And I had a question. Um, so you said that they partnered and after the company sold or changed hands, and then they went out and sold a package. So were they uh doing training, consulting? Do you know how they delivered it?
Yeah, they went in as consultants, and the first thing they would do was have employees take their personnel file and troop out to the parking lot and put it in the burn barrel
This
because
is fabulous.
they said
That
what
is so
what
great.
they said, historically personnel files were just a way to have reason to fire you,
Mhm.
and we are doing away with all of that.
Mhm.
So
Cool.
amazing. So amazing.
Yeah.
Paul has a question or comment.
Question: mechanical time frame of the story, Grace Hand, that you just told. Can you get a bracket of year begin, year end?
It was in the 70s, early 70s.
Within somewhere 70 to 80.
Hmm. And then when Grace Ann and I went, it was probably 89 or 90, somewhere in there.
90s.
Uh,
They
reason
did it for a
for
while.
reason for asking is the jiggling and jarring of my memory, where I cannot hear the word Teamsters without hearing an utterly different universe than the one you just described. Because in St. Louis, which isn't Pittsburgh, but we have enough smokestackiness that the Teamsters were very powerful here. And there is a name which I cannot recall, and this is probably irrelevant to the conversation. It is sufficient for me to say this is just a remarkable and stunning story to hear that I've never heard. And how did we not get this news of the Teamsters being the good guys? Um, that's unprecedented in little me.
I think when we deal with love and respect, what's the third element, Grace Ann?
Dignity.
Dignity. Then
Mhm.
it can tame even a teamster. Go ahead with Tom Lemke.
So I looked up his website, and it's very interesting because he says if you build the people, the business, the people will build your business. That's one of his quotes, but it's really an interesting thing that he talks about love, dignity, and respect, principles that change lives. For each one of us, no matter our background or station in life, a basic truth inherent in our humanity is the need to be valued and to be treated with love, dignity, and respect. Value of the person, which is his company, is the cornerstone of all relationships, not only at work, but in the home, the family, and every social setting. When love, dignity, and respect are experienced as actions of affirmation, appreciation, and recognition, people and businesses thrive. People will follow the leader who values them. Very profound statements.
Mm-hmm. And Henri Saval says human potential gives the greatest return on investment. If we take care of our people, that gives us more than technology. It's the infinite return.
And I would argue that it's even more important now because of the complexity of business. I think that's what's really changed it, made it more important.
But the other thing, the other reason that this is a special story is that, we're in the management field, David and I, and all too often you see the words used, but no action backing them up. And that's why the story of the guy who came in late, that's why they told those stories, because they weren't exceptional examples. It was how they operated every day. And that's what makes the difference. My question is always, okay, yeah, this sounds good, but how do you do it? What do you do daily that makes it real?
Let's go to Betty. And I had a little entree for Betty. In France, the way Frederick Taylorism was implemented was entirely different than in the United States. And I was shocked to learn about it, that it didn't have this dividedness between union and management. That it was more of a cooperative, negotiated thing. And that's, I think, the foundation of SEAM. When I see that in SEAM, that same thing, that they're looking to form togetherness with the union instead of, divide and conquer. But how do you see it, Betty? And what were you going to
Yeah,
say?
yeah. Well, what I do think about the Taylor lessons over here, they never had Ford or any of those iconic companies making it look like you absolutely had to follow to the letter Taylorism or whatever. But I was inspired. I wanted to say, just like you two, that this is Saval in action, or the socioeconomic approach to management in action. But my example, which is a counterexample, it's where I didn't get the respect and dignity that I would have liked. I was, a Peace Corps member in Ouagadougou, where French is the international language, and I translated for Caterpillar the farm equipment at that time, but what we know as the, I've forgotten the word in English. So Caterpillar from California came over to Ouagadougou, to Burkina Faso, and they wanted to talk to the experts in Ouagadougou on what equipment they would need. And unfortunately, as I translated, I ran into this problem professional translators know how to deal with. There was total lack of respect on the part of Caterpillar toward the Africans. They literally felt like they had to teach them what this equipment was all about. And I had learned just how sophisticated anybody in Burkina Faso is about our equipment. They even all, from the CEOs down, learn how to repair everything. Just like the little boys out in the street would learn how to, not the girls, but the boys would learn how to clean out the piston of my motorcycle. They were my motorbike. They were simply fascinated by it. So as I was translating some very rude remarks that Caterpillar was making from their English to French, it became obvious that I was embarrassed to actually repeat their words. And the people, the Burkina Bay, they're called, uh, allowed it to go on for a while. And finally, they stopped the whole thing and said, Betty, you don't have to cover up for them. We know they're kind. We can feel it in the way they look at us. There is no respect for us. So why would there be in their words? Just let us know what they're trying to say, because we either have a deal at the end of this or we don't. But tell them that we are not at all sure to buy anything from people who lack respect. And the word respect I'm using because of the influence of this conversation. What they wanted to say was seeing us as people. They don't see our personhood. And if Amin was here, I would give him the word, the personhood, because I think I've got it a little off. So what I would like to say is, I feel like it is rare for people from different walks of life to actually feel the total dignity of the other one, just like that. Teamsters and business people is very odd, but I also saw that sometimes it's people from Africa versus people from the States. It can be men and women in the boardroom where the woman is expected to serve coffee while they make decisions. So, very inspiring, very inspiring.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that that the value of the person thing. I think it was them that had financial literacy classes for the employees, so that they would
Mm-hmm.
understand the issues the company was facing,
Okay.
and
Mm-hmm.
rather than and so you know it is disrespectful to assume that just because they don't have the knowledge that they're ignorant and incapable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they were interested and they took the classes.
Yeah. Did it, quick question, because I've often dreamed of that sort of place. Did it cause the people to question any of the financial choices? Because that's what people are afraid of when they put their cards on the table, that there will be pushback.
It's like you know, I used to teach HR stuff too, and they used to say, you don't tell them that we're going to be laying off people. You
Mm,
hit them at the last minute. That was the way it was done. It was one of my first studies. I went out and interviewed people at Alcoa Aluminum, where they, you know, didn't. Of course, people start to hear anyway. They have their
mhm,
own ways, but this keep them in the dark because you can't control the reaction, and they'll all leave, and we'll be stuck, and oh, who knows what. Yeah.
mm,
So I wrote an article about, from what I saw, if you don't have trading partners that you view as equals, it never works. If you,
okay.
no matter how benevolent you want to be, it
Mm,
disempowers the other side if you view yourself as more powerful and them as less capable, less anything.
mhm,
We have to not only just pretend there are equals, we have to see the value in them and their own perspective.
mhm. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's, you know, because the United States went through years of supposedly benevolent, you know, the old phrase, kill the Indian to save the man. We thought we
Mm,
were doing them a favor,
yeah.
and we did do more harm in under the name of benevolence. So it
Yeah.
has to be an equal relationship for both sides to win.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you. Gracie, and I'd like to show a couple of things if you can stay a little bit. Uh, Ian Mitroff. I never quite got that pronunciation right. Grace Ann used to work with Ian Mitroff and, and Ralph Kilman in particular in Pennsylvania, where she went to school. And I worked with, as you know, Louis Pondy. And Pondy and Kilman, Mitroff were kind of three musketeers and growing up. And can I show you a couple of things, Grace Ann? Okay, let me try to get this share thing working.
And he pronounced his name Ian.
Ian. Okay, well, I don't know. I was always nervous around him. Okay, so This is a picture of the actual chapel, and it's Pittron Steel, Pittron Steel. If you want to look at the company, you can see the in the background. That's where the ashes would come out, and they cleaned this room up. And you can see people in ties and people that are working with the coal, and you know, and there's Wayne in a tie, uh, you know, at the pulpit, stronger than steel. Uh, so it's called the miracle of Pittron Steel because when they were doing their togetherness and sales were up and profits were up, they had a fire and it melted a big part of the factory. Nobody was hurt, no people were hurt, but the lockers were melted, like the lockers in high school. Well, they were melted, but they opened one of the lockers and one of the employees' Bibles was there. And it was a little charred, but still usable. And so that's one of the reasons they call it the miracle of Pittron Steel. Ian Metroff, uh, and one of his students, Denton, did a study of spirituality in the workplace, and they did a book called The Spiritual Audit of Corporate America. And they actually quantitatively went around in corporate America to find out how much of what's going on, spirituality in those workplaces. And I don't know if you read those books or not, Grace Ann, but I did it at the time. And it was they're fascinating studies. Can you talk a little bit about Ian Mitroff?
Um, what about the spirituality in the workplace?
Yeah, just anything you want to share about Ralph Kilman, Ian Mitroff. Yeah, anything.
Well, they took different views of things, and they had a broader perspective of strategy and problem solving in organizations. And well, Ian and Ralph together, they said that one of the main problems was that people looked at strategy in terms of which tool do you choose. And it was just a matter of choosing the tool. Whereas, especially Mitroff said, you have to see what is the conceptual model underlying the issue, the question that you're dealing with, and which conceptual model have you unquestioningly accepted and not looked at the other possibilities. And so, classic example he had from one of his professors, who was Wes Churchman in philosophy of science, was the story of the elevators in a building where people complained the elevators were too slow. So management, in good management fashion, postponed a decision. They said, oh, we're studying it. We're looking into it. And while they were studying and looking into it, one of the managers knew a behavioral psychologist type person who said, let me have a shot at this. And his proposal cost a few $100s as opposed to thousands of dollars. That was the engineer's proposal for speeding up the elevators, which could have been done, but very expensively. And so what they did was it was a couple $100s, and they had no more complaints for the following months after they implemented this cheapo strategy. And the strategy was to put mirrors on each side of the elevator doors on every floor. So instead of the speed of the elevators, it was the perception of slowness that they addressed and the psychological aspect. And everybody was so busy looking at themselves, nobody complained about the speed of the elevators anymore.
Thank you, Grace Ann. I very much appreciate that.
Yes.
And just a couple more things on this. Um, so there were a number of publications and people Grace Ann and I have been influenced by over the years. One of them is Jerry Bieberman, and Mike Whitty is another one. uh, Lee Robbins, and Len Tischler. So there was a kind of a group of them we hung out with at our former identity um, before quantum storytelling conference. We had a thing called C'est Moi, Standing Conference for Management and Organization Inquiry. We had C'est Moi because the deans would fund it. If we had said Standing Conference Management and Organization, if we just said C'est Moi, it's us, French, they wouldn't fund anything. So it was kind of a joke. But Jerry Bieberman in particular had us do a lot of intros to books. These are some of the books and things. And I counted in the journal I edited, this last one, the Journal of Organization Change Management. I counted that during my editorship, there were 65 papers on spirituality and organization, uh, and different faiths. So, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Jesuit, all kinds of stuff. And so I became the journal was being tilted towards from organization change to doing so much spirituality that one year Grace Ann and I organized a reception at the journal meeting. And by the way, Brits never come to a journal meeting unless you serve wine and beer. So we were serving wine and some beer for free and some pizza. Um, anyway, so we attracted a good audience. And I said, why don't you guys form your own journal? I don't have the space to handle, I can do some spirituality. I'm not against it, but form your own journal. So it's like a school dance, a school dance in high school where all the guys are on one side of the room and all the ladies are on the other side of the room. You're in this gymnasium and you're a junior in high school and they say dance and you say, I'm not dancing. And they go, so it was like that because the people on one side of the room were from religions and they said, this will be the journal of religion, management and religion. And the other side of the room had people like Judy Neal, et cetera, and Jerry. Uh, and they said, well, we want it to be spirituality. We don't really want religion in the title of the journal, you know. So I got on my knee and I was walking the one group of tables. I said, I'm listening. What do you guys want to do? They want spirituality. You want religion. I go to the other side. They want the opposite. What do you want to do? And finally, I just threw up my hand. Why don't you have both words in the title? So it became the Journal of Management, Spirituality, and Religion, you know. And it's a very successful journal, by the way, in the Academy of Management. So I just wanted to throw that in. That's something. Were you there at that meeting with the pizza, Grace Ann? I got pizza on my mind. Were you there? Do you remember any of it?
Formal meeting. It was milling around and stuff. But that's how the whole division of the academy got started from the core of people that were at our Samoa conference. They had added people, and then when they talked about a journal, that's when they got Judy Neal and Ron Purser had been to our conference, and they created the division.
Yeah, they created it, but I didn't create it. I had enough to do. But
David,
yeah, go ahead. I
I was
heard
just
it.
realizing that I don't know if the people here, I don't think they ever heard my Naudique story. That was
I I
several
can't
years.
believe that. You must tell them an Adik story. What this is?
It's reprinted in Jerry's book a couple of times, two or three times. Um, it was when I was really busy riding three horses, three Arabian stallions a day, and teaching full time, four course load, an hour away from me. And so I was real busy, and sometimes I was out there riding at 6 a.m. in my indoor arena I had, the barn and 28 horses and all that stuff. And sometimes at midnight, I'd be out riding. And so I was riding at 6 a.m. for a period of time, and my Nadian's son, Nadik, I was taking him out every morning, and he was getting more and more restless as I was tacking him up. And he would dance around, and he would pick up a foot like he was going to kick at me, and he would turn his head like he was going to snap at me. And I'd give him a smack on the neck and just keep going. And he was always fine when I got on him. But he became more and more annoyed at me, angry, upset, something in the cross ties in the morning. And so one morning when I'm out there, I'm thinking, what am I doing? Hitting this horse. I saw him born. He saw me before he saw his mother. And I'm out here because I love these horses. They're my children. And what am I doing hitting him for being bad? So I looked at him and I could see his hurtful look. He's like, and hurtful and resentful. And I patted him on the neck and I said, I'm sorry, buddy. How are you? And I just patted him and soothed him. And he was like, well, that's a little better. And so I put the saddle on him and I rode him, and he was good as he usually was. Every morning after that, I would take him out and I would stop, pat his neck and say, how are you, buddy? And just pat him. And he never misbehaved again after that. And so on one day, after I had done this for, I don't know, a week or two, I went in and I said, I've had a bad day. It was, I guess, still 6 a.m., but whatever. He left his food, walked over to me, and put his chin on my shoulder. So I said, if a horse needs to be acknowledged as another living being, even a horse, how much more does a person need that? And we learn to suppress it and not express it. And how much are we hurting the people around us by not giving them that acknowledgement?
It's a beautiful story, Grace Ann. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, that is stunning.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
what it occurs to me now, is human interaction so often is I need to steel myself up for the next minute, 5 minutes, or hours, and suppress my feeling to manage, to cope, and the interaction between one human being who, let us say, begins an encounter with that mindset. I gotta be tough. I gotta be, there's work to be done, there's decisions to be made, and that triggers or engenders, perhaps, in the other human being, if it's one-on-one, that same thing. Oh, this is how you're the leader, I'm the follower, and this is how you manage reality. You get steely and tough and impervious, and it cascades into, we have all become zombies whose way of getting through the turmoil, the inevitable turbulence of a given day is to become insensitive and zombified. And we keep generating cycles of that until, and it's really, Grace, I've heard this story maybe for the third or fourth time. This is one making me cry. Because it's the image of the horse coming over and putting his head on your shoulder that is so human. And when it's a horse that's teaching you how to be human, this is what you tell us all the time. Well, they're just horses. No, they are not just horses in the way that any human being is never just a human being. You know, one of them. It's like this is a walking, talking miracle. This you, whoever you are. And if you have that in your head, there's a chance that you might start generating in the other person that same attitude. And it's like, why should this be such a revelation? That's how can I use that word? Epiphany, revelation, all this religious bullshit. I think all of that religious bullshit is all of that spiritual bullshit. It has always been there, and it has always been true, no matter how layered over with feces of every conceivable kind happens.
Okay, okay. I'll remind you, you are being taped here, and I'm not going to edit this. Go ahead, Betty. Betty, let's let you reflect for a minute, Paul. Betty, go ahead. Sabine.
Well, and I'd like to give an example of what Paul was talking about just now, or I think it's a good example. Human beings being as dignified as, I forget the name of your horse, but I saw this last Tuesday, when other Democrats and myself got into a tussle about what are the ways we can push back against what's going on, etc. Some people were becoming a little insulting by making it seem that others had not caught on to the real problem, and there were hurt feelings all around. You could tell. One person diffused it all. Is that a good word in English? Evacuated all of the tension. Great, diffusé, I want to say, by remembering that at a recent event, I had had one drink too many to get back to the metro in Lyon, and that person said, "Betty, did someone stay with you last time? You had to walk in the dark to the metro by yourself, and I worried all the way home." Well, yeah, another person had walked with me, and the reason I had had one too many drinks is somebody bought everybody around, and I should have just pushed their drink back. But anyway, the very fact that that person expressed concern for me, and that I was able to designate another member of that group who stayed with me all the way to the station, even though his metro stop was the opposite direction. He was to go to North Lyon, and I was going south. And I think he saw how important he was there. But it was the fact that we were talking about humans caring about humans that stopped the entire atmosphere of anger that had been going on for too long. So that for me is an example of both Paul and what's the name of your horse?
Nadi.
Okay, Nadi. Yeah, that's what I wanted to give an example of.
Go ahead, Tom, please. Thank you. Thank you, Betty.
So I've worked for various management people in my career, some good, some not good. But one of the interesting things when I was at Kmart and we got a new CEO was that he went out and visited stores. So we had 2,500 stores at that time. There were stores that had never had anyone from the home office in Troy, Michigan visit them in 25 years. So the fact that Chuck actually showed up and said, "Hi, I'm the new chairman. I came here to see how you're doing," like transformed the entire place, because people started saying, "Wow, we don't even know what a CEO looks like out here in Beaufort, Montana, wherever the heck he would be." But it was very, very interesting. And so we had a lot of corporate jets, right? Because we had stores all over the place. But anyway, So they one day they flew into this town, and the district guy was so nervous because no one had ever showed up. He didn't know what to expect. So they pulled the jet onto the tarmac or whatever and parked the thing, and the guy backed up his van to pick them up and managed to back right into the wing of the airplane and put the wing through the back window of his van. Needless to say, the guy was like completely freaked out. I mean, here he's like, I'm going to get fired. And, they had to go and have the plane checked out to make sure that it wasn't, was still flyable. Anyway, so these two guys, the chairman and the CEO, show up the next morning, and they went to a drugstore and they bought these collars looking like they got like severe whiplash. And they came into the store, and the guy saw these things and he's like, oh my God, this is terrible. And they took them off and said, no, we're okay. And that little thing of just being human and joking around with this store guy who was mortified by what had happened. But the word quickly traveled throughout the entire chain of 2,500 stores that these guys are different. They care about us. And Chuck would walk around and ask customers, how you doing? Or ask the store man, is there anything else we can do back there in the ivory tower to make your job better out here? And it's just that simple thing of talking to people and listening to what they say. So thank you.
I see Sabine is ready. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think so, but you have to mean it, right? I mean, it has to really be honest. Not like, I mean, and I think we sense if somebody really wants to hear how we're doing or not, I mean, yeah, I think there's a difference, whether it's just a superficial, okay, you go into the hardware store and say, oh, how are you today, and already from the way it is said, and, if it's really meant or isn't meant. And honestly, I've been tempted when I sense it wasn't truly heartfelt. Well, to go into this, well, let me tell you, like take half an hour, I mean, I know you don't really care, but I mean, I think it's in the delivery, how you say it, or if it's just a formula that you expected to say because you have to say it and then stop at that.
So most people are able to pick up
That's
naturally on that. And one of the
that's
things that I teach in my workshop with the horses is that it was Paul talking about how we are so trained not to express weakness. If we complain, if we say something bothers us, it reflects badly on us and the organization. So we are trained not to say things. And on the other side of it, as managers, we train ourselves to ignore it because we feel like we can't do anything about it. We don't have the power to deal with it. And so we just, we ask somebody, oh, can you do this job? They say yes, and we know that they don't want to. But we don't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
And so, it's all of that mutual ignoring. And so in the horse workshop, I teach people to pay attention and see and they can see all this in the horse. They can see it in other people too, but we've just learned to block it out. And so,
I think you're right. It's like seeing the whole picture, right? I mean, and I really, a neighbor's dog that they had years ago. I mean, that dog knew when I was feeling down too. I mean, it senses. I think a lot of it is just, looking beyond, I mean, really like being tuned in, right? And I'm like, not just here's the role that somebody plays, but, also what is different, today. I mean, if you know somebody, well, you sense when you're really tuning in, that something is different, something is off. and to be tuned into it. What's wrong. You're different from your usual self. Tell me what's going on. I mean, I think it's that sensitivity to all of that openness to really tune in, to be fully there.
I sat across from an HR manager for a major department store who said, well, everybody's important. They aren't really, but we need to pretend like they are. He said it that way.
Yeah.
Wow.
We have to pretend that they're important and their ideas are important.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
you know
Wow.
that Henri Sagal talked about that. He said it's an opportunity for the rest of us to show that we mean what we say by following through with what we say we're going to do. And to actually say something that you're not going to follow up on is to dig a hole for yourself. So I'm seeing right now the importance of what he was telling us at that point. It's
Well,
exactly
the TRIST, the socio-technical system stuff out of England, when they first started, one of the things they always did was, if you have a committee working on a project, nobody can make a decision unless they are working on that solution. Can't be from the outside and say those guys have to do this. You have to be the person who's doing it.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm
David,
gonna.
your hand is hard to see. I didn't realize. I'm sorry. You've been trying. It's like my screen. The hand
Oh,
is
that's okay.
winded.
I'll get
Yeah.
in eventually. I'm going to show my film now, so we have enough time to discuss it. And I really appreciate you, Grace Ann, for staying, and hope you can call it the Thank You Nunzio film. So,
And I have to look for the furnace guy because he should have been here by now. He must be lost somewhere.
all right, we'll stay for a couple of minutes, and then,
I'll be in now.
all right, it'll play in the background. All right, so do we have everything going the way we want it? I think so. I think so. Okay. Should be able to hear this. Hi, Olivia. Do some setup for Enthinkment.com, Enthinkment.com. This is David Bogie. And well, I was reading in Tom Lemke's book again, and it says, "Behold, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh. Is there anything too hard for me?" Well, I want to tell you the story a little bit about a steel company, a foundry, and Wayne Alderson got shot in the head during the service, and when I met him, he had a dent in his head. I met him with Grace Ann Rosille. Uncle Nunzio from Pittsburgh took us there, and we saw more CEOs of more major companies than you can ever imagine. And they were all there to hear the story called Value of the Person. Now, to set that up in Enthinkment, since we're going to dive deep into kind of meaning and words, Gurudev Shikshabanaji has a bunch of passages on going beyond and being with. And beyond, going into that space between. So in the Alderson story, there's that space between the unions and the management, a very divide and conquer strategy on the part of the company. Wayne went in there, changed it all, said, hey, why don't we talk together, do some together listening, as Grace Ann and I call it, some together telling, and see if we can find out some common ground here. So they swept out, cleaned out the ashes of a pit where the ashes drained when they melt the materials for the steel. And they called it the chapel. And they held hands and they prayed and they fought and they shared and they got beyond their individual selves and their individual egos and all that good stuff. And they reached a new level of awareness that I call beyond. And it is going beyond the five senses like we covered in the third eye, and it's gone beyond our ways of thinking that we get socialized, schooled into ways of thinking. So in Enthinkment, we call it Enthinking, Enthinking. And this is about today spirituality, your divinity. If you're a Christian, you take the seed of Christ and you accept the seed called Jesus, and you have a divinity. If you're Jainism, like myself, you have an inner divinity, and you cultivate that through reincarnation and getting rid of all of that karma stuff. Now we can look beyond the confines of family, country, religion, politics, nationality, whatever it is, and we can work on finding that space between us. And when we refuse to relate to the beyond, relate beyond the bonds of family, nationality, ethnicity, you name it, then we can't be brother and sister with our fellow humans. And when we relate beyond the echo chambers that we're all in, that mold and shape our sense making, the five senses, right? You know what they are, and our thinking questions. So we ask different questions depending on that. So we're going to go beyond all that today, beyond all divisions, beyond all duality, to the chakra there we call the crown chakra. Gurudev Shikshabanaji taught me this for years and years, the chakra, right? So Shasrara, which means 1,000 rays, 1,000 petals, and you know it, right? You're sitting there on the lotus in your meditation in Buddhism and Jainism. So Sahasrara, Sashara. So that's one of the terms that Gurudev taught me. And he taught me to go into the Sanskrit. He also cites the Bible, which is interesting. Be still and know that I am God. He cites on page 74 of his book on the 7 energy centers. So he says, well, get into the stillness. Not the ripples, not the big waves on the ocean or the lake that we talked about last time, but nothing remains but the I am, the oneness of the life force. And that's the way Gurudev talks about it. So Siddhas, Siddhas, has to do with the souls. And we want those souls to reach perfection. I cite the mantra Om Ariham Nama, which means I am the worthiest energy which I am. And I bow down to the absolute energy which I am. That's on page 75 of his book. And I do not see separation when I'm in that. I see separation other times, but not there. And I go, Soham, I am that. Sohum, I am that. And so we go through into the 7th gate of energy. It's not really a gate, it's 1,000 rays, 1,000 leaves of the lotus that we sit on. And we stretch our vision beyond into the higher self, into the 3 S's, as I call them, the spirit, the soul, and the true self. And in true storytelling, we talk about it as reflection on that true self. So that's some things I wanted to leave you with. We're going to go into the Wayne Alderson story, and thank you, Uncle Nenzi, for taking us there and introducing us to all these wonderful Fortune 100, 200, 300 executives hanging out in Pittsburgh and there for Wayne Alderson. Value of the person, So check it out. Next, I'm going to show you one of the videos I organized, and I hope you like it.
Just to share this incredible philosophy he discovered at Pittron Steel with, well, everyone else. Okay, so now we're going to connect Alderson's amazing real-world story to a really fascinating theory. There's this academic, David Boje, who put a name to the kind of higher level thinking that Alderson just seemed to tap into naturally, and he calls it the W7 Beyond Wish. So, what in the world is W7? Well, we all know the classic 6W questions, right? Who, what, when, where, why, and with whom. Boji says there's a seventh one, the wish. And no, this isn't like wishing on a star. It's about a perspective that comes from your higher self, from a whole new level of awareness that's way beyond our normal day-to-day thinking. And this really gets to the core of what the W7 perspective does. When you're looking at things from that level, all those divisions that create conflict, management versus labor, us versus them, they just kind of dissolve. You start to see them for what they are, totally artificial lines we draw in the sand. And to show just how universal this idea is, Boje connects it to all these ancient spiritual traditions. For instance, in Sanskrit, there's the Sahasrara, which you might know as the crown chakra. It's symbolized by a 1,000-petaled lotus, and it represents opening up to pure, unified consciousness. It's the exact same idea as the W7 perspective, just, using a different language from a different culture. And isn't that fascinating? This idea of a beyond perspective, it pops up in so many different belief systems. I mean, look at this. In Jainism, it's about finding your oneness. In some Christian traditions, it's about the divine seed that's inside you. With the chakras, it's the crown. And for Boja, it's the W7 wish stream. They're all different words, different paths, but they're all pointing to the exact same place. So what's the payoff? What are the real-world benefits here? Well, adopting this beyond perspective helps you break free from that rigid black and white thinking. That's exactly what Wayne Alderson did. He completely shattered the us versus them pattern. This way of seeing things lets you question your own emotional hangups, and get this, it helps you build trust way faster. The source even mentions a cool concept called vujade, which is like seeing something familiar as if for the very first time. Ultimately, it's all about tapping into that deep inner peace, or what some people might call your inner divinity. Which brings us to the most important part of all of this, really. How do you make this personal? How can you actually find this beyond perspective in your own life? This quote from Gurudev Sri Chitrabhanu really puts into perspective how high the stakes are. He says that when we refuse to relate to people beyond our own little tribe, whether that's family or nationality, we are bound to clash with other people. He's saying that's the root cause of so much friction in the world. And here's the final and maybe most powerful idea. Getting to this higher perspective, it's not some far-off goal you have to work towards for years. The potential to shift your awareness, to tap into that W7 beyond wish, it exists right here, right now, in this very moment. Like the quote says, our whole future is contained in the present moment. So, we'll leave you with this to think about. We've seen this one core idea, called a lot of different things, right? The crown chakra, oneness, the divine seed, the W7 wish stream. The concept seems to be universal, but the words we use for it are deeply personal. So the question for you is, what's your name for it? How do you put it? So I want to take you to a place you probably wouldn't expect to find a story about overcoming deep division. A steel foundry in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Deep into kind of meaning and words. Gurudev Shiksha.
David, you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, I had to turn off the other video stuff. Okay, so that's what I got. So I want to hear from Sabine now. Go. And everybody else I want, but I know Sabine prepared, so go ahead. Because
Now you're on
Muted.
Sabine.
Sorry. I have quite a bit of stuff, so I don't know if we should delay that until January or not.
now jump into it. Let's do it.
Okay, now, first of all, David, I wanted to pick up on what you had told us, and you were going into transcend. And I looked at, the German übersteigen. And übersteigen is to exceed, to transcend. So, and in one of the passages, he talks about being transcends in its oneness all other kinds of categories, like, species and types. So this is a higher level. Being is the highest level of oneness. And things like species or categories, which are all divisions, don't even come close. So, in other words, it is, a hierarchy of levels of oneness that he is seeing. And nothing is higher than the oneness of being. That is, in a nutshell, what I wanted to say about that. It's a higher level of oneness. And everything else, are division. And it is said there is no unity in Heidegger's view, such as being. It is oneness. That's what it comes down to. However, I also prepared something else, and I think what I wanted to do is, and I think it is about, like what we had talked about, like really being tuned into things. So I went into the section of being there. How do we know our own there? How, in what sense are we our own there? Dasein, right, in the world. And there are, in Heidegger's view, there are two prongs to this. One of them is state of mind, which is in German Befindlichkeit, which is our affectability. We're not just in the world like a bottle or something. We are in the world, things approach us and we are letting ourselves be affected. It's an openness. The second prong to this is verstehen, understanding, and the two are actually interrelated. So he's saying that understanding always has a state of mind, like an emotion, an affectability. So it's like we can't be like completely unbiased. In other words, we like to think that, but we're not. We're already always coming with a history, and we're coming with, the way in which something affects us, no matter what we do. So I would like to jump into, if I may, number 29, and I think I am going to go into the being there as state of mind. And I think it ties into what we were talking about today, because it is, in Heidegger's view, Erschlossenheit. It's an openness that we fundamentally have. It's an openness to ourselves, to others, and to the world. It is an openness, but it is the foundation that we can from there go and feel and be analytical. We let ourselves be opened up to whatever is coming to us. And it is this fundamental openness that is the foundation of learning, our relationships, everything, really. Then he goes deeper into that term Befindlichkeit, which is state of mind. And this has fascinated me for years. And there are several aspects to this. It is what he calls an existential, which means a fundamental way in which we are wired. So what does this Befindlichkeit actually mean? What does this entail? And a crucial point here is an awareness of our own thrownness. Like we are thrown into this life. We are thrown into, a family, a city, a kind of life. I mean, what if you're born in a housing project, right? I mean, nobody asked you, do you want to be born? Where do you want to be? Would you like to, grow up in a housing project or in some kind of rich suburb? We are not asked these things, right? So we are thrown into this. And the mere fact that we are thrown into being without having been asked whether we want this or not, Heidegger says that awareness of thrownness, that, and I quote, dass es ist und zu sein hat, that we are and have to be. That in itself, he says, is a burden, and I quote, delivered over to its being. We're like handed over to, okay, here you are, now what? Right? We're literally delivered over in his words. Now, he's also saying, when we are becoming in these moments that we become aware of that thrownness, that responsibility of being, that thrownness upon ourselves, that we don't want that and that we turn away from that. We don't want to think about, how we're at the mercy of so many things that affect us and frankly can harm us. So he says we're turning away from that. And another prong, so that awareness of thrownness is part of Befindlichkeit. The second part of Befindlichkeit, that state of mind, is, and I love this word, in this context, it's betroffen werden. And that means that we are affected. We're becoming, and I quote, becoming affected in some way. It concerns us, right? I mean, and it's like, what is that very openness that we have to the world also makes, it makes encountering possible. We encounter things, we encounter people, but it also makes us open to vulnerability because, we gauge, right, what is coming at us. Is this good? Is this bad? Or do we sense a threat approaching? And that threat, of course, can be, like a very existential one, right? Somebody loses their job, can't feed their family, and how quickly something like that, company downsizing, right? How quickly that turns into something that is absolutely existential because your very being is at stake. So this Befindlichkeit, is if you get right down to it, it is tied to the Wozu, which is the caring about and protecting about our own being. So that is one side of it, this Geworfensein, this thrownness into a situation that we say, okay, here you are, go swim. Sink or swim is what it comes down to. Now, and I think I would like to continue this in January, the other side of it. So we have the thrownness, but the other side of it is verstehen, which is understanding, but understanding in a sense that is entirely different from how we understand the word understanding in the usual sense. Because what he is saying is there is a fundamental understanding. It is an understanding of being. And it's understanding, like how to maneuver in the world. It is a fundamental understanding of that from which all other forms of understanding are derived. But understanding in Heidegger's case is its projection, and I think this is crucial for what we have been talking about as well. It's a projection onto possibilities. So you have the thrownness on the one side, but you also have this fundamental projection upon possibilities. So he is saying that we are thrown possibilities. So we are both, thrown into something, but we're also constantly at the same time possibility. And it is only because of that, that laying out of, seeing possibilities, that things like interpretations become even possible. I mean, this is just, in a nutshell, but, there is this basic laying out of, this seeing possibilities, and that extends to ourselves. What can I do? It can be for others. What can my spouse do? What can my children do, which I don't have, but it's also like it's possibility in general. It's like, oh, what can I use this piece of wood for that I just found? I mean, it's seeing possibility in everybody and everything and in yourself. So that's as far as I think I wanna take that today. So what I think the takeaway for me is that thrownness, but within that, constant possibility, and to be open to that possibility, and not, just be blinded by the thrownness. It's like, well, it's to see beyond, right? It's to see beyond the thrownness into possibility.
Thank you so much, Sabine. Thank you so much. It's absolute perfection. Go ahead, Olivia.
Yeah, I have to leave in 4 minutes, but I did want to ask you if there's any flavor, and maybe you can bring this in when we talk about this again. But I feel like before we incarnate, we actually choose our path. We choose to be born into poverty, perhaps, or a terrible condition, because that's our soul path to get the growth that we chose for that lifetime. So I'm just curious if there's any room in there, or how he might see it.
I mean, I think, not an initial choosing, but you can choose, once you're thrown, you have different paths. I mean, I think Heidegger would say you still have different paths open to you. You can be, you have to find yourself, you are thrown into something, into all this world and all of that, but it is your task to find yourself in all of this and to become your authentic self. And you have that possibility.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Well, I'll just jump in Jainism. We have karma. And if we don't get it right in this life, we come back in another life. And if we get it wrong, we don't want that life we're coming into. So there's a perpetual, for us, Grace and myself, we just reincarnate until we get it right and then get to the crown. So wonderful session today. I really appreciate it. Let's just open it up and get the after party going. And so thank you all. I really appreciate it. This was a wild session, I think.
But that's what we do here, right?
Yeah. And Tom, I keep calling you out every week. I hope you don't mind. I keep saying, and Tom got me into this, and now I have to deal with it. So, and thank you, Sabine. Thank you, everybody. love the talk about Lyon and France and Saval and Tom, your work, and Paul and Livia and your question, and Grace Ann. Wasn't she wonderful with her stories? Well, I'm biased. I'm so biased, you know.
It's okay. So are we. So am I. I should speak for
So
myself.
I'm going to turn off the recording because I got a couple of questions for you before you go. Bye.